I'm recording now. Okay. Well, hi. I want to thank everyone again for joining us. My name is Jocelyn McCrae, and
And I'm Alyssa Mora.
and today we will be discussing housing insecurity and the effects it has on college students and their mental health. Here we have with us two lovely individuals who will offer insight on the severity of the issue.
So we're going to allow you to introduce yourselves. Let's begin with Camille. Can you go ahead and tell us a bit about yourself?
Yes. Hi, I'm Camille. My pronouns are she, her. I am a graduate of UNT. I graduated last year. I actually work as a recovery counselor in Chicago. And I work with people who do have mental health issues and often do work with them on how to get proper housing and how those health situations affect their housing and their income and their ability to live on their own. But I'm very excited to be here today.
Awesome. Thank you so much for that. And then Abby, can you go ahead and tell us about yourself as well?
Hello, I'm Abby. I go by she, her, and I'm currently a sophomore at UNT doing my undergraduate studies. I am just I've had some experience with UNT housing that has made finding housing for next year difficult. So I just kind of wanted to share that experience.
All right, so I'm really glad that you hit on that a bit. Let's actually talk about housing insecurity because I feel like many people don't know exactly what that is. So it's defined as the lack of security in housing that results in high housing costs relative to income, and this branches off into so many things such as poor housing quality, overcrowding, and even homelessness. So Abigail, I know you talked about you experience some things that make it harder to find housing for the upcoming year. Can you tell us a bit more about that?
Yes, I have been going back and forth with UNT housing since February because I missed the initial application to get into housing for next year. There was no email sent out except for one in October. And my roommate and I just missed it. And it's been a very difficult process trying to get back into housing. It's basically, it does cause a lot of anxiety. And I know there are a lot of other students in the same place because a lot of people don't know if they're going to have housing next year. And it's sort of difficult because I like to make the decision to move into an apartment. I might have to pay the cancellation fee for the housing queue that I'm in right now, which is about $500 from what I remember, which is something that would be honestly, a real waste of money and something that would be pretty upsetting to have to do. And we're not really going to know if housing will become available to us, those of us who are in the queue, until like the end of the semester or the summer, from what I've been told.
And then Camille, I know you said that you work with people to try and help them find housing. Have you yourself, I know you live in Chicago now, but even when you lived in Denton, have you ever experienced housing insecurity of any kind?
I have. I definitely found it difficult housing in Denton through the college itself. So I ended up living on office housing, and I also struggled to make sure that that was taken care of, especially during the pandemic. And then also out here, I've experienced some housing insecurity. I've had to move twice, 2 months after I moved out here due to the housing and with landlords and stuff too. So housing insecurity is a very real experience, and especially in different ways too. But yeah, it can be very difficult.
I will say, since we're talking about it, I know I'm supposed to be moving soon, actually in this July, and finding housing is actually really hard. I wasn't thinking about it at first. And then when I started thinking about it and I started seeing inflation and all of that rise, I realized it's actually really hard and it's taken a very big emotional toll on me. Because now I don't know where I'm going to be living after I graduate. And if I should continue and go to grad school just so I can have some place to live, but also figure out what I want to do with my life versus just basically graduate and look for somewhere else. It's a very stressful time right now, especially with prices being raised all over, not even just in Dallas. I know, Alyssa, we had talked about it before that you said that you also experienced something similar.
Yes, absolutely. So I actually really got the bulk of it when I moved back after COVID. So spring of 2021, people are coming back. And I remember there was a point of time where I wasn't sure about signing leases just because I wasn't sure if we were supposed to go back to school, like if it was actually going to happen, and I didn't want to get trapped. And I remember for like maybe a month and a half, I had to basically couch surf with my friends for a couple days while I was in school, and then drive all the way back to San Antonio, the 5 to 7 hours it gets back to go home, to stay the weekends, and then drive back up. And that was in itself so stressful. And that takes a mental toll on you as well, because you're trying to get used to the semester, you're trying to get like your ducks in order, but you also have nowhere to live. And then when I did get an apartment, it was very terrible quality, had random leaks. I don't know where they came from, and situations like that. So there's so much that just contributes to your overall well-being, as well as just the way you live your life when it comes to your housing. And I learned that very much in my time here at UNT. Let's see. So sorry, I'm like wind is getting my hair in my eyeballs. So there, of course, are mental ways that you get a toll. So can any of you kind of explain to us how this housing insecurity or your difficulties with housing has taken a toll on you or affected your mental health?
Yeah, I can go ahead and talk about it a little bit. So prior to me transferring to UNT back in 2019, surfing, I struggled due to some family mental health issues. I did not have a consistent home. And I was couch surfing with friends and relatives, and I found that to be extremely difficult. It took a toll on my mental health. Also a full-time student and a full-time employee at that point. And so hard to want to get up and feel like you're bettering yourself when the place that you're laying your head is somewhere where you can find security. And prior to that, I was lucky enough to be in Denton and have friends at the time that I could move in with after the pandemic had started. But I definitely struggled. And I think that when we think about like Maslow's hierarchy of needs, I think the foundation is shelter. You want consistent shelter, because without a place to have all of your items, to have all of your belongings and all of your feelings that there, it can very much take a toll on your mental health. And during times where I felt insecure about where I was staying, my mental health symptoms were exacerbated. I was definitely tired and fatigued and emotionally exhausted, because I was concerned and nervous about what the next step was. Because every night I lay my head down, knowing that this was a permanent place to call home. Or, if the semester was ending, I would have to think about how I'm also fatigued with school, especially during the pandemic. But then I have to struggle to find a place to stay that I know was not going to meet the standards of where I wanted to live, with leaks or mildew or rowdy neighbors or something like that. It just makes it so much more difficult. And I can finally say that I live in a home that I really, really like, and it has completely changed my mental health symptoms in a very positive way. But I would say even before I was going to UNT, I didn't have that security or comfort, and that'll definitely change it. You want emotional and security, and you also want physical security in a home. And it's really hard to find that when you're a struggling college student. Sometimes when you just have to take what you can find.
Thank you so much for sharing about that. That is truly the best way to put it, just because your environment is so important, especially if you're a college student, though. Abby, can you kind of tell us about how your mental health may have been affected by your housing?
Yeah, I agree with what Camille said about sort of needing a place to be, especially. I feel like that's something that's really important to me personally. And I don't do well when places are changed around on me very fast. I struggle with anxiety already, and because of sort of these issues with housing and not really knowing where I'm going to end up next year, or knowing if I'm going to have to spend a lot of money on an apartment and have trouble getting to campus for my classes, that anxiety has been heightened a lot. Just because every once in a while I'm reminded that, oh, I don't have I don't know where I'm going to be living next year, and that's a little frightening. And I also have chronic migraines, so that anxiety and tension leads to a lot of migraine symptoms, a lot of chronic periods that start like recurring and going over again. And it becomes a problem with schoolwork, especially because then my schoolwork is affected, how much I get done is affected, which heightens that anxiety and it cycles over again. So I think especially being a student who already struggles with something on the side, it's a lot harder to struggle with not really being secure about where you're going to be living at a given time. And I think just that fear of not knowing or ending up in a place that will be a bad environment is really frightening for me, especially since I'm very young, I'm only 19, and it's kind of terrifying because I don't know a lot of people on campus. So if I end up with someone who is terrible or doesn't like me or something, it will be a really stressful experience for sure.
Thank you, Abby, for sharing. You hit on something that I thought was very interesting. You talked about how it starts to boil over into other things like schoolwork. And something else that I feel like it's not often talked about is the effect that housing insecurity has on your physical health, because it's so easy to, you need some place, you find the cheapest place that you can, I'm sorry, that you find the cheapest place that you can afford. But just because you can afford to live there doesn't mean that it's the best for your physical health. So I know a lot of places, especially after the first winter storm and everything freezed and there were bursts, lots of apartments grew mold and the prices decreased, so it could be more affordable. But now, with the increase, now you're going into the cheapest place you can find, but there's lots of apartments that have not dealt with the mold growing in these apartments, and people are getting physically sick. And I remember when I moved into my current apartment, I kept sneezing and I had no idea why I kept sneezing. And then I found out there were so many wet spots. So I really liked how you spoke on that. Have you guys ever experienced something where it affected you physically versus mentally as well?
Definitely. When I was getting ready to graduate from UNT last April, I was trying to plan my move to Chicago, and I didn't have the luxury flying out here and touring apartments beforehand. So I was counting my fingers and hoping that everything would work out. And I ended up selecting a apartment that I had saw through FaceTime, but you're not going to see all of the structural issues, on one face call. So once I had moved out here and I had started living here, not in this apartment, it was one beforehand. Um, there was mildew. There was a lot of dust. There was a lot of bugs. The bugs here are so different, but there was just a lot going on, and it definitely affected my. Well, I found myself sneezing a lot. I found myself. Uh, I think also it was psychosomatic because I would just get so exhausted when I would go into that space. It didn't happy. It didn't feel positive. So I would sleep a lot, and I just felt like the emotional and internal turmoil experiencing was down in my physical in my ability to want to get up and do things. And then also I had a roommate who was severely allergic to the mold and the mildew that they ended up having to move back to Oregon because it was just so bad and they had such a bad experience in Chicago. So I luckily did not have such severe effects with that, but it definitely took a toll on us. And the legs were not very responsible or kind, but it was very hard to even take a shower because in the shower there was just mold and mildew everywhere. And we had to live in there for 2 to 3 months, and I felt like it was my lungs and affecting physical and mental health overall. So very difficult.
Yeah. What about you, Abby? Have you ever experienced something where it affected you physically?
I'm not sure if I can say like a specific like housing situation has affected me physically, though I can empathize with like someone having severe allergies because I'm basically allergic to most things like dust and mold and like most trees and grasses in general. So sometimes switching environments for me really fast can have a severe effect on my allergies. And when it comes to looking at some of the reviews for the apartments I've looked at have been very poor and said there's mold and there's issues. So that's something that comes into play when I'm looking at if I'll have to do off-campus housing because it will affect my allergies and I probably will get migraines based on those allergies as well.
All right, thank you so much for sharing. I want to jump back to Camille really quick. I know that you mentioned that you were a counselor. What kind of clients do you cater to?
So primarily right now I work with adults who have some form of a mental health diagnosis and have mental health symptoms that affect daily living and their ability to take care of themselves. Um, I have worked with children in the past, but right now I work with adults from 21 to 70. Yeah, and we definitely deal with their housing, a lot to do with their housing.
How many of those clients would you say struggle with housing insecurity? If you could like guess a number or percentage.
I think 75%. Yeah, it's a large one. I am currently working with adults who are closer or kind of on like Medicaid or have such severe mental health symptoms where it does affect their income and their ability to work. So a lot of times we have to find grants or housing or go through different programs that will fund and take care of the majority of their expenses, which is also very difficult because Chicago has lots of different types of apartments and the quality of the apartments. So often I deal with clients who have apartment than mine, a typical apartment because the government that. But then there's also clients that we deal with where they are living in very unsafe and uncomfortable conditions because if it was up to only their income, they wouldn't have any and they would be able to come out in this area.
Well, I would have never guessed 75%. That is a very large amount. How many of would you say are students, if any are?
It is a lower percent, but I can, out of all of the clients that I have, I would say about 10 are students, maybe like in a pool of 80 or something like that. So, but I can see how it does affect their housing specifically. They have a set of different problems and difficulties, also trying to like obtain a degree, all of these things that are happening on top of that. Finding housing, of course, when you're a student in this pandemic, a lot of times you are at home, and if you don't have a safe home or you don't have access to Wi-Fi or something, that is definitely going to change your ability to function as a student on top of insecurity and mental health symptoms.
And what is it like for you as like a former student to hear this and to hear that like, um, like 10 of those students are suffering with this?
It's truly it's so heartbreaking. You can, I've definitely worked on seeing my emotional side from, completing the task at hand and these people because you don't want to make them feel more so like a victim than what they're already experiencing. But I feel as though from my experience, it was untraditional, and I struggled a lot myself through school, and I am also putting myself through school out here as well. And I thought that I had it hard. To say that I don't, but obviously we all have different experiences and a different set of situations. But it is unfortunate to watch people try to better themselves and get and take them out of their circumstances when their circumstances are so apart of how they view themselves, how the world views them, and their access. You know, a lot of times I'm trying to link people with better access opportunities, but it can be so difficult when all of your life you've been told and you've been raised to be one thing, and then you think that you have this opportunity. It feels unreal. It feels like a fantasy. It feels like the ball is going to drop. Something is going to happen. You know, it can be very difficult to watch these students struggle, and sometimes you just have like metaphorically hold their hand and cross your fingers that you're doing everything that you can. At the same time, the system is also going to do what the system does and work against us in many ways.
Thank you so much for that, Camille. I really appreciate you going into detail. And I think it's incredible that we get to see this other side of it where you are actively trying to help and offer these resources and give these students who have so many obstacles just in their way of being able to succeed. Because not only is like housing a huge issue for them, and that's just like one little facet of what they're going through in the midst of a pandemic as well. It's really just a lot on these young kids. And Abby, you're 19, you're young and you're already going through so many different things and trying to grow as a person and trying to get your education and go through all this, but also you're having to deal with housing. And right now you're in just a state of wondering, what am I going to do? Is there anything that you can say kind of about Camille and what she just said, kind of about the other side of things where someone's trying to help you?
Yes, I can. I've actually been working with a UNT counselor from the Counseling and Testing Services who's been helping me contact housing. Honestly, it seems like it's been like at least every other week or so that she's reached out to them to try to just get some answers about maybe when there will be availability for the sake of my anxiety and also I'm sure other students as well. And I think it's really important when struggling with this kind of thing to have someone like that. I think if she weren't helping me, if I hadn't already been reaching out to counseling, I would be struggling so much more just with dealing with it. Because unfortunately, from the experience I've had with housing at UNT, at least, they don't seem to really listen to the students when we ask things or when we call. My mother had to call them just to get information about the housing queue. Which was really sad because, even though I am very young, I think as a student, I should be able to get the information that I need to succeed and get somewhere to be for next year. But it seems like there tends to be a lot of, I guess, red tape about that. And they sort of tell students one thing, but they'll tell the parents because, the parents will get up in arms about it. But having a counselor helping me has been helpful as well, because I feel like I've got more information than some other people have, because I have talked to some other people in the housing queue, and it is a bit upsetting because I feel like they don't know a lot about what's going on because they haven't had access to someone to help them get that information. So it's like a really significant step in this process I've been going through.
Thank you. I think that's great that you're able to reach out to someone that can actually help you. I know I talked to someone recently in the housing department, and a lot of those housing specialists are actually just students and they're just trying to get by themselves. And, when you ask them for resources, they don't know. They're not sure what to tell you. And it really just comes down to communication. And when you do ask, a lot of the time, they're like, oh, we have online resources you can look at. When you look at the online resources, it's just same thing that you're still having issues with. It's not very helpful. So that's great that you do have access to someone that has been able to help you on this journey. Other than, let's say, counseling, are there any other ways that you've been able to kind of manage your mental health while looking for a place to live? Because that is a very stressful situation. Are there other things that you've been able to do to help yourself?
There are some things that have helped me. I think honestly, talking to other students who are going through a similar issue has been really helpful, and it's really validated the issue I've been going through. Because at first, when I missed the application without any notification or anything, I was kind of hard on myself because I felt, just ignorant that I missed it and I should have looked for it and that I should have had that information ready to go. But a lot of students went through the same thing, and I was assured that it wasn't just, something that I missed, but really that most people were not informed about. So talking to other people has been helpful, and just hearing what they're going through and how they've been dealing with it, and just trying to offer support to those people. And it's so much just a sense of saying, I'm with you right now. We're going through pretty much the exact same thing. And I'll give you the information I have, but I hope we can figure something out. And that's been something that's just been really great to do. And I've honestly connected with people through that in a way, just talking to some people who've been going through that.
Yeah, if there's one thing I've seen in the UNT community, it's definitely just that sense of community when it comes to housing. Really, you can like mention housing to anyone and they'll have something to say about it. Um, and as we go into that, there's also so many ideas onto what housing can improve on, especially at UNT, but just in the Denton area. We have prices going up like crazy, even in student apartments and regular apartments. My personal rent for like a super old apartment that's definitely not worth it just went up $300 like last week. And I'm like, okay, great. My next rent's going to be way over my budget, but I'll have to make it work. I'm signed into a lease. I'm roped into it. It's just something I have to figure out. Can any of you offer any ideas on what should be done either by our politicians or community members, or what can be done for the housing and security crisis?
I think it's so difficult to create a solution. Like you can, or with things, like you can point out the problem, but a solution for this specifically is so hard. I think like the two important things have with this type of situation is validation from others and advocacy from others. I think Abby had touched on an important part, just about like her counselor continuously like contacting department and talking. Potentially there could be some kind of advocacy that goes to Denton city council meetings and really expresses the issues and the sentiments that students have towards housing, because Denton gets a portion of its like and its money from the college atmosphere, from the college campus. And also TW students are probably experiencing this as well. And I will say that Denton seems to have can really have a like social justice complex when it comes to having groups come in and state what the issues are. So maybe like having a group that meets in front of city council and talks about these issues continuously. But it's really hard when the system feels so I don't know, massive, because every single student knows what it's like to experience housing difficulties in Denton. It's not one person is no matter the income, no matter the tax bracket to an extent. So I'm not sure what could be, but continuing to experience and express these issues and come together and advocate for each other is probably really important.
What about you, Abigail? Do you think there's anything that politicians could do to basically help the housing insecurity crisis?
Yeah, I agree with what Camille was saying. I think like just bringing awareness to it and having an open discussion about this issue would be something that would be really, really good for the community, because like she was saying, I feel like there's not really a portion of students that hasn't been through some sort of issue with finding housing, whether it's finding an apartment or just trying to get housing on campus. And I think, I think a lot of things, unfortunately, lately, it seems like a lot of students are being viewed more as numbers than as people, and just sort of what'll look good for the university or what'll look good for the community. And I've seen a lot of things about apartments, scamming students out of the money that a lot of them really don't have to spend on things that the apartments are sort of leeching off of them in a way. So I think that's a dangerous thing that's going on, and that's what's also creating a lot of anxiety about getting an apartment is, when you're new to the process and you've never lived somewhere by yourself before, it's sort of like, what kind of issues will I see? What kind of scams are there out there that I might come into face, I guess, like what I'll experience. So I think creating an awareness for those kinds of apartment scams and awareness of like what kind of issues students are facing in apartments would also be important. And also just, I wish there was a way to like sort of factor this in, but just seeing, students as people, we're people with individual incomes, with individual problems, with individual needs. And I think it's really important to recognize that it's not just another number you're dealing with, it's a person that's gone through so many unique experiences.
Thank you, Abby. I really liked what you said. I do agree with all of that. They see students kind of like as their parents' little figurehead, like, oh, your parents' money is your money, and that's what we're gonna take. Or they take advantage by saying, oh, we're gonna give you a $25 Visa gift card if you sign with us, but we're gonna make all that money back in the amount of rent that we're gonna charge you. So both of you have experience at UNT, you have experience with universities. Do you think there's anything that universities should do more to help their students?
Definitely. Again, I don't know what the exact solution would be. I want to say that not only do apartments think of students as like a number, I think UNT thinks of students as just a number. I think that a lot of the care there that they say that they put to caring about each individual student feels more performative than it does feel actual, because I think that if a lot of these universities, not just UNWU, but maybe like the majority of universities if they really looked at students' income and looked at their experiences and thought them more as a human and less as like an opportunity to fund the music department, the sports departments that aren't even doing well, there could be some kind of advocacy. There could be some situational change. I don't know if it's talking to Neil. I'm not sure what Neil is really good for sometimes, but I think that just having the college itself really look at what the students are getting and seeing them pass the number, because I don't know about y'all, but that's definitely how I felt when I was at UNT. I want to feel connected. I felt like they were making a lot of choices based on percentages, and not us as people and students, and the difficulties that and the difficulties that we face going into that pandemic. It really, the school really showcased itself or its sentiments towards students when the pandemic hit and when all of those things kind of occurred. Like I said, again, I'm not sure about mission, but I would like to think that the schools really take a step toward viewing us as students as true people who struggle to pave our way through college.
Thank you, Camille. Abby, do you have anything you would like to add to that?
Yeah, I do. I really resonated with the struggle of feeling like I've been seen as a number more than anything. And UNT, I feel like I unfortunately seem to learn this this year so far, but it seems like a lot of like what they see when they bring students in is more of the kind of money that student will bring in for them, the kind of money that will go into different departments, how it will affect the school's funding as a whole. But I think it's almost irresponsible to me that the university has been able to just sort of push students out of housing this way. And it's mostly the upperclassmen that are struggling because, of course, the university, it looks good to the incoming freshmen. They want to give them housing and they want to give them that college experience. But all of a sudden, when you you go forward a year towards graduation, which will also make their school look good. It just seems like you're less important out of nowhere. And I really wasn't prepared to suddenly be less important than, the incoming freshmen. And I feel like because there's not enough space to accommodate all these students, which I know it's kind of impossible to possibly accommodate everyone, but because it seems like it's so limited, it just seems like it's something the university really needs to consider, where it's like, do we, provide more housing for upperclassmen, or, are you going to just push them out? Because I don't think it can keep going this way, and I don't think it's fair. My roommate tried calling housing about the Santa Fe Hall, I believe, because on the housing website, it's just saying it's unavailable basically, and you can't click on it, even though it's not full. And when she called, they told her that they're deciding which types of students would be in there. And it was very upsetting because it seemed like they were just going to give it to more freshmen, because they probably let in more people than they had room for. Because I do believe they also tore down the College Inn Hall because of issues, but they didn't build another one or start to work on another one. So it seems like it was kind of almost like a hasty decision on their part with no warning that housing would be limited this year. I mean, also there's just an issue with communication in general. I tried talking to the dean of students about the issue, and they tried to tell me to go to housing, which like they were the ones giving me the issue in the first place. So I think the communication between administrations is pretty flawed, and it seems like nobody really knows what's going on when you try to ask them things. So I think just in general, trying to also improve on that communication between departments and like know what's going on with the school is something that's really important. And I feel like it's been lacking for a long time.
I agree. I know I used to live in off-campus student housing, and I felt like even though it's considered student housing, it was somehow always miscommunications with one party and another. Even when I lived in a dorm at UNT, it was somehow something was always missed in translation. I didn't understand it. It made it really hard and unpleasant to live in those situations. So I want to thank all of you guys for joining us and sharing your experiences. This isn't an easy thing to discuss, and it affects many people. You have shared with us insight and gave us deeper looks into how we should think about housing insecurity, because not many people considers the toll that it takes on the mental health. And if anyone is listening, I hope that you utilize the resources that we're actually going to have listed below this. But I want to thank you guys so much. I'll let Alyssa
And
talk.
once again, I'm Alyssa Mora,
I'm Jocelyn.
and we hope you have a really great day.
All right. Thank you guys so much for